Pros and cons to submitting to smaller presses. I published this middle grade fantasy in 2021 with a smaller press. If you want to know my personal experience with publishing with a smaller press, you can fast forward to this time. Here are the basic pros and cons of publishing with a smaller press. Let's start with the pros. First, you typically don't need a literary agent. Most smaller presses acquire unsolicited manuscripts, meaning that you do not have to have a literary agent representing you to submit to them. So you don't have to go through the querying process, and you can submit your work much faster. Another pro with working with a smaller press, they typically have faster turnaround times when publishing your book. My book was acquired in January of 2021, and it was published in October of 2021. Typically in a traditional publishing setting, you're looking at 1.5 to 2 years to maybe even 3 years before your book is published after it's been acquired. Another pro of working with a small press, sometimes you get input on your cover. The first cover that I had for my book, I didn't think matched the book at all, and they actually gave me another artist and gave me 3 mock-up drawings for the cover. I was able to give my own input on the characters and how it looked, and I really loved the way that it turned out. Usually with traditional publishing, you get what you get, and you typically don't have much say-so in the cover. Also, with dealing with a smaller press, it kind of has a more family setting and feeling to it. I was able to talk to everybody on the team, whether it was marketing or editing or outreach. There's not a ton of books that they're focusing on, and there's not a ton of authors that they're focusing on, so they're able to give you more attention. Now let's talk about the cons. The first con would be marketing. Typically, smaller presses don't have the same outreach as traditional publishing presses do. They're not always able to get them in brick and mortar bookstores, and it is dependent a lot on you, the author, to speak to those bookstores to try to get your books in there. Now, there are some very well-established small presses that have the same outreach as traditional publishers, but I'm speaking of the more majority of smaller presses who don't have that great of outreach. Another con with publishing with smaller presses: if you don't have a literary agent, there's no one to read the contract for you to make sure you have as many rights as possible. Smaller presses typically have very tight contracts, and they take most of your rights. Rights as in print rights and ebook rights and audio rights. It's nice to be able to have a literary agent look over the contract with you. They're able to negotiate rights with the publisher, and they can also negotiate advances and other things that typically you as an author are not able to negotiate on your own. Something that's big for me is that my book can be in schools and can also be included in AR testing. If I'm going to visit a school and a teacher's going to have their class read the book, I would like for them to have the benefit to take the AR test and get points from it. My smaller press did not require reviews needed for my book to be placed on AR books or to be more desired in school libraries. Reviews such as School Library Journal, Kirkus reviews. Now, Kirkus reviews you can buy on your own, but they cost around $400 at the lowest price. School Library Journal is a little harder to get reviews from. Now, that may not be the same for all small presses. Some small presses may pay for those reviews. So now we're to my personal experience with a smaller press. I did have an editor. They did help me edit it. I felt like it helped the book to get better. I do love the cover. I love the way that it turned out. I think it looks absolutely wonderful. But here are a couple things that I wasn't expecting. My smaller press did not do well with sales after the pandemic. A couple months after my book came out, a book that I had planned on potentially being a series, they cut the juvenile fiction imprint. And unless I wanted to spend thousands of dollars to get my rights back, I couldn't publish anymore in the series. Now, that's something that can happen to any press, but with smaller presses who may be struggling with sales, this is always a possibility. The second thing was the contract that I was talking about before and them retaining all of the rights. 2 weeks after I got my literary agent, my agent was contacted by someone who wanted the media rights for my book. We weren't able to negotiate anything because I did not retain any rights. My previous publisher had all my rights, and the certain media people who had reached out were only interested if I had retained some or all of the rights. Now, does that mean that I missed out on this huge opportunity for my book to be made a movie? No. A lot of my favorite books, the media rights have been acquired, but nothing has ever come of it. Typically, they keep the rights for like a year or two, and if they can't get the movie or the TV series going, you get the rights back. But that is definitely something to think about when publishing with a smaller press. Honestly, this was a positive experience. It was definitely a learning experience. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know if you ever have any other questions about the publishing world. I'm always happy to answer. Happy writing!